So here we are, Thursday the 21st of May. We're at the Community Media Hub in the Reference Library, and we've been joined by Paddy Ashdown. Good morning.
Hi, good to be here.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. I know you're on your way to sign some books and stuff at Waterstones across the road. What do you think of what you've seen this morning?
You know, everybody knows, well, at least most people know, that Paddy Ashdown was a Royal Marine and a soldier and a commando. What they don't know is that Paddy Ashdown was a youth worker. It was one of the most formative periods of my life, just before I got elected. And I learned the value of this. I learned a huge amount, by the way. I learned the importance of giving young people the opportunity to own things and control them themselves. So this isn't only a bit about my past, it's like coming home in a way, but I also think it's a bit about the future. This is really important. You see, the politics of Westminster, as we see in this period of expense scandals and so on, is failing. The real politics that matters, the one that connects people to the democratic process, is the politics of community. And the kind of things they're doing here is providing to people information they need, but also giving them the chance to participate in the decisions that their community has to take to give them a better life. I think if we look at the future, you may well find the politics of Westminster and the nation's dying, but the politics of the community beginning to live and beginning to grow. And this is where it all begins.
Can I ask you a question? Obviously, you've got a lot of experience as an international statesman, working with communities, for example, like in Bosnia, that have been fractured by civil war. And your next role, I believe, is going on to Northern Ireland to look at the marching parades and things like that. How vital do you think something like a free facility that's seen as being non-political, like a library, is to communities?
Absolutely crucial. I've been involved in Northern Ireland for about the last 18 months, and we nearly brought this work to a close. But you know, the beginnings of understanding, the beginnings of compromise, the beginnings of peace is talking. And to be able to talk in a neutral arena about the things that matter to you. It doesn't matter whether you're a Catholic or a Protestant in Northern Ireland, you're worried about the condition of your street. You're worried about the chance of getting a job. You're worried about the kind of health service you get. That supersedes, that is above your ethnic differences. Doesn't matter whether you're a Muslim or a Croat or a Serb. You are worried if there are traffic jams in the middle of Sarajevo. You're worried if the house you get doesn't have a decent supply of electricity. So getting people to talk together about their common problems is an absolutely crucial first step to building the communications links that can in the end deliver peace. Let me give you a rather harrowing example. Srebrenica, the terrible place where 8,000 men and boys were killed in 3 days by hand by the Serbs. I did a lot of work in Bosnia to help those Muslims, all women, the men had all been killed, back into their community. And the very first thing we had to do when we moved them back was sit them down with their Serb neighbours, many of whom had been involved in the massacres, and get them to talk about just those common things that enable them to be able to build a pattern of communication from which they build a possibility, at first to live together, to cohabit, and later to cooperate. It all begins here.
Now, you mentioned about youth work and young people. Obviously, young people are a key element to what we do here with the two Young People's News Agency. Now, we've got quite a few of them that are involved in like the Youth Parliament and also the Children's Council as well. What would you say to a young person now about not only interested in maybe being involved in politics, but just wanting to get involved and maybe being able to make some change where they actually live?
Do it. This is your life. I mean, my real worry about the present scandal, about what's happening in Westminster, isn't so much the MPs who have abused and in some cases broken the law. My real worry is the public gets fed up with democracy. My real worry is that people withdraw from the democratic process. And that will mean that fewer people vote, which means that the extremists get more of a chance. The time for demagogues. My fear is that the BNP, for instance, may well find an opportunity in this. If you don't vote, you give them a chance. If you do vote, you give yourself a chance. Now, I recognise that many young people will find politics boring. I recognise that many young people will have no respect for those in the political process, and I understand why. But you can get involved through organisations like this. You can get involved in your own community. You can get involved in the democratic process without necessarily being involved in the political parties. Start that way. It's essential you do. If you withdraw from involvement in your own community, it could fall into the hands of those who will do terrible damage to your future.
And can I ask you one final thing before we let you go? And thank you very much for coming along today, obviously. When we spoke to someone this morning and said we'd like to reschedule a meeting because you were coming down to be interviewed, they said, Paddy Ashdown, one of the few good guys. Now, having briefly read your book quickly this morning, can you tell me, of the many roles and many lives you've had as Paddy Ashdown, what you think has been the one that's defined you or has enabled you to feel you've done the best?
I have no doubt about that whatsoever. The high point of my life, the purpose of my life, was to be a Member of Parliament representing the community I'd always lived in and loved at Westminster. I think that perhaps we've lost sight of this, that there is a great nobility in giving service. We politicians increasingly think we're the masters. No, we're not. We're the servants. And the nearly 2 decades I spent representing my community in Westminster and fighting for what I thought its best interests were. I didn't do it without making mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes. But that I regard to be the high point of my life and the best thing I've ever done. And in a sense, the rest of my life was an apprenticeship to be able to do that job properly.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ashdown. I appreciate it.
Nice to see you.